So as far as the Patriot movement, and that's what LWN is, we are part of many patriots out there searching for the truth and delivering the news like it should be delivered. All right, welcome America, World Patriots. We're back here at LWN, man. We had a hard time with some internet issues, and I've got a special guest tonight. Jeff B was with us there for a little bit, came in and was able to give us some analysis on what he thinks going on. But there's other things out there that we really need to pay attention to. And so I've got my friend Andy from Miles Franklin with us this evening, and he has agreed to come on here and give us his take on what's going on around the world and the world economics and the bank collapses and closures around the world actually that's going on right now. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Andy in right now, and we'll start the conversation. The UN has reached out to the United States and other central banks around the world, asking them to drop the interest rates. Andy, that's a little concerning. And why would the UN really be part of that?
Because it's shown that, and first of all, good to see you, Mike, and good to be here. It's because most of the countries in the world have lots of dollar-denominated debt. And especially the poorer countries, they have to spend a whole lot more money to pay off the debt as the dollar is rising in value and rates are rising. They have to spend more of their own money to convert to US dollars to service and to pay off their debt. It can bankrupt countries. And look, the real reason is that the UN asked them to stop raising rates because it was crushing the developing countries and wreaking havoc on the markets more than anything. The Bank of England has already pivoted. We've seen that, and I think the Bank of England more or less has laid the foundation for what the U.S. market is going to do, what the U.S. bank is going to do, Federal Reserve, I should say, in the respect that the Bank of England was going to get tough on inflation as well, try to normalize their balance sheet, and the pension funds started to blow up, the bond market started to blow up, and as soon as that happened, the Bank of England reverted, they pivoted, and they came in and bought up all of the bonds. No one was buying the U.S. or the UK gilts, as they're called, their bonds, and so rates were rising, the pension funds were breaking, and the Bank of England came in and said they'll do whatever it takes to bring back some normalcy to the market. Well, this is not how it's supposed to work. Mother Nature has corrections and recessions and has her role in all of this too. And if we thwart economics and Mother Nature and come in and manipulate the outcome, it only exacerbates the eventual outcome, and that will be, in this case, the UK is heading down the path of hyperinflation, which ultimately leads to rising rates, which ultimately blows everything up anyway. And I think the way
it affects the world economy, and they're talking, the article that I just read, they're talking about inflation, world economic inflation, and we're already seeing a huge rise in 40 years here in America. And this is what I'm trying to get across to our listeners tonight is this is warning signs. And we've been really trying to highlight warning signs here at LWN for a little over a year since you've been part of us, Andy. And we're so grateful for you giving us your time and coming in here and trying to explain this stuff to us, because a lot of people, we read articles or we see news clips or somebody puts out a YouTube video. It's hard to understand what's truly going on. And they're propping economies up, and that'll only last for so long. You know, the U.S. economy and the market jumped 500 points, I believe, today, and the U.S. economy is just trucking along like nothing's going on, and somebody's feeding that, and it's not going to last forever, because once you feed that pit bull and you're out of food, he's going to turn on you. And I really believe the economy is going to turn.
Well, you're right. So it is weird how it turned. The U.S. 10-year yield is now below 3.6, and it's fallen over 45 basis points in a week. And at the same time, the dollar's relative strength is massively lower. In other words, the dollar is at all-time highs, roaring in terms of its relationship to the yen, the euro, and the Canadian dollar. Its relative strength is throughout the world, its strength is strong, but its real strength, its strength here at home, it is horrible. And look at how much it costs to go to the grocery store, to go out to dinner, to go to a sporting event, or any of the things that you would want to do, day by day. The costs are extraordinary. The cost of going to the grocery store, when you talk about groceries being the most expensive they have been right now since the height of inflation in 1979, when you see that a year ago house sales were at their highest point ever, euphoria, everyone is partying, their house prices are going to the moon, it's amazing. And last month the new house sales fell to the lowest level since 1952. So, right, when you talk about where we are right now, things are spiraling all out of control all around the world. You have Pakistan, a country with nuclear weapons, on the verge of default. You have Argentina running 75% interest rates. What the hell is inflation if interest rates are at 75? Turkey at 83% interest rates. Turkey, by the way, has bought more gold than any country in the world over the past 7 months, the first 7 months of this year, first 8 months. And now they have also expressed interest in applying to join the BRICS nations. But look, what happened in the UK, I think, is going to happen here very soon. And that's when you'll really see precious metals come to life, because it will signal the fact that the Federal Reserve has no choice but to continue to inflate, just like the Bank of England. They have to, or the markets will continue to crash. And what's interesting about all of this is that rising interest rates over the last several months has done nothing to stop inflation, not even a bit. So they got rates roaring, where a 30-year mortgage can double in a year. And yet the rates, brought up to 3% or nearly 3%, with inflation running 3 times that, based upon the CPI, which is a bogus measurement of inflation. It's not real. Real inflation is 16 or 17% when you put food, energy, and housing back into it the way they did prior to 1980. But even using the CPI numbers at 8%, 8.5% inflation with 3% on the 10-year treasury, your return is still negative 5.5% per year compounding. And just raising it up that far, not even anywhere near finding equilibrium with inflation, you're blowing up the markets. And in the case of the UK, same thing. Pension funds were blowing up. Well, after years of nearly of raising rates where inflation didn't, do anything, it's still strong as it's ever been. I think it's becoming obvious that it doesn't work, and at least not at the level they will raise them to, unless they really get serious on rates and raise them above the level of inflation, which they won't. because they'll blow up the economy and all of the
Now they'll
markets.
crush it. They'll crush everybody.
That's right.
And so I've been talking about two realities that we live in, Andy, and I've discussed it with you a little bit. I've discussed it with some of my other inner circle people, and the reality that I see, LW, as I see, and you and I have talked about this before, the reality that we continue to go down the path that we're going, which is a false economy, and everything is out of freaking control, including inflation, gas prices, people flooding the southern border, or
Yeah.
the other reality that you speak of, which is raising interest rates to combat inflation. But if they raised interest rates to that true balance that you speak of, to hit interest rates, both roads, both realities continue to go to where they're going to intersect, which is going to be, in my opinion, a collapse of the economy.
Well, and that's right. And I think it's even more specific to me. I think it's a collapse of the currency and a new currency. I think the Fed will continue to buy bonds from the U.S. government and other large institutions to fund the failing corporate bond market, which Bank of America just came out and said they continue to raise rates, they're going to blow up the corporate bond market. You know, corporations can raise money by selling stock or bonds, and it's a much easier pathway to sell bonds, and they don't give up ownership of the company in essence. And it's becoming too hard for them to service this, so they're, you know, you'll see companies go out of business. They won't be able to raise the capital that they need, but you'll see the Fed come in and buy the corporate bonds, which they're really not even allowed to do. They're only supposed to be able to be allowed to buy Fannie, Freddie, and U.S. Treasuries, but somehow they changed those rules to buy corporations, which they did in the middle of COVID. But they'll buy those bonds to keep the big corporates afloat. They'll buy U.S. Treasuries because no one else in their right mind would buy U.S. Treasuries yielding a negative real return of north of 5 or 6% by their own bullshit numbers. Using the real metrics, the real numbers, those that real return, that real negative return would be somewhere in the neighborhood of negative 15%. But this is all leading to a new currency, most likely a Fed coin, to replace the failed experiment that we call the US dollar. And you have to wonder, is this intended? Was this intended to create this systematic undressing of the US economy, of the US dollar? And we're at a point right now where we're running out of options. I think we've ran out of options. And when you realize that right now, you talk about how the market was up 500 points. Well, how did the yield on the 10-year Treasury fall by 40 basis points in a week? That's massive buying by the central banks. And they're buying all the debt and propping up the stock markets. They're propping things up best they can. And this just ensures much higher inflation. But it will also, in effect, try to prop up the stock markets. This is all leading to a catastrophe, because I truly do believe that we are on the heels, as I've talked about on your show for a long time, a religious experience when the BRICS nations bring their new currency to the marketplace. Now, they've already come out recently and said we're issuing a new world reserve currency. Their finance minister of Russia just came out and said it will be pegged to currencies and commodities. So you have to wonder, what does that mean when they come out and say, hey, we've issued a new currency, and here it is, it's a world reserve currency, it's pegged to gold, it's pegged to oil, it's pegged to all these commodities. I think they'll use the distributed ledger technology, the digital yuan, that's been successful now for 3 years and over 20 billion in trades, to be the rails of the new digital BRICS currency. And you look at all of these countries that are now joining since I've last been on with you: Turkey and Egypt, Saudi Arabia.
Did Saudi Arabia? Saudi Arabia.
They have applied for owners. They have applied for membership. Mexico, Iran, Egypt, Venezuela, Argentina. I mean, all of these countries. Do you know that all 13 of the OPEC producing countries are on the Belt Road Initiative? All 13 of them on the Belt Road. 6 of the 13 OPEC countries are on or in or have applied to BRICS. The 7th of 13, the United Arab Emirates, just joined the BRICS Bank. All of these countries are joining together against the West. And when they flip the switch and dump dollars because no one needs to own them any longer, if OPEC is selling oil in other currencies, maybe the new BRICS currency, maybe they open it up to euro and rupee and ruble and all of these currencies before you see the new BRICS currency formulate. But you had the members of the BRICS countries come out and say, we are issuing a new world reserve currency and it will be pegged to something. And this makes sense to me why gold was reclassified tier one, why all the banks are buying it. Look at Turkey. They have 85% interest rates, massive inflation, huge instability, and yet their country has bought more gold than any country in the world over the last 8 months, and they have expressed interest in joining BRICS. They're all going to move away when this reset happens based on debt and rising rates for the West. These countries will move away from it, and they're already positioning to do it. And when it happens, that's when you get this great reset here. This is when the Fed, we don't even pay attention to their dinking around with 75 basis point increases. This is when the rest of the world, 80+% of human population says, you know what? It's time to move away from the Western hegemony. And all of these countries are the countries with all commodities. So, you know, in and of themselves, they're not able to challenge us, but put them all together, their economies are bigger and stronger, their militaries are bigger and stronger, and their cohesiveness is bigger and stronger. And that's a problem. And that's why I think things are getting frightening in my estimation, that the things I've been talking about on your show for over a year are coming true. And I'm almost as surprised and shocked as that they're coming true as I am. I mean, I saw it, but I never, when you actually see it happen, it's shocking on one hand that I was right, but frightening on the other hand, because it's not only have I been correct in telling people what's coming, and in fact, but it's moving at a pace that's scary as hell, Mike. I mean, it's moving at a pace that I can't even understand how fast it's happening, and yet the world is fixated on the wrong things. They are not paying attention to the biggest change, really, in the power structure in all of our lifetimes, and maybe in centuries, because you're talking Western dominance for centuries. And if you look at where all the money is going, where all the infrastructure is going, where all the relationships are being built, where all the commodities are being held, it's all on the other side of the Atlantic. It's all moving east. It's the Eurasian continent. So this is my message to everyone. Wake up. It's getting to the 12th hour. And in my industry, Mike, in the 33 years I've done this, over the last month, I have never seen such a draining of physical product ever, except maybe in 2008, where everything disappeared for a period of several months. But not only do you have record withdrawals off the London Metals Exchange and off the COMEX, but you're seeing all of the physical supply in this industry dry up, and premiums go to the moon, and the biggest distributors in the world are out of product. It's unbelievable. One of the biggest distributors in the world, I look at their inventory, and about 65 items, probably 59 to 60 are sold out.
Wow.
And 3 or 4 of them say no delivery till November. The only maybe 2 things that are available were the South African elephant, which is made by the Rand Mint, and 1,000-ounce silver bars, and limited. So, I mean, everything else sold out. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. So the big money is positioning themselves away from this potential chaos. And the insider selling over the last several months in the equity markets is enormous. So you put it all together, big money is pulling metal off the exchanges. The world is moving away from the West. The central banks are being forced to pivot of the West, the Bank of England. The Fed is close behind. And when they do, that signals inflation and loss of all confidence in the Western system. So I think it's getting real, much more real than I would have thought when you and I first started talking about this stuff a year ago.
You know, Andy, this is what I'm noticing tonight. The urgency in your voice and your body, your body language is definitely not what it was a year ago. You're pleading to people to pay attention, and a lot of people want to dismiss this stuff. Trump's going to save everybody, and we're trying to give you the signals here to save yourself. Trump is not going to save anybody. You have to save yourself. Here's a couple of things that I've noticed recently, and I'd like for you to comment on that. I've noticed a lot of people starting to, and I don't know if I'm using the right words, technical words, but they're shoring up their retirements. They are, when you talk about things being empty off the shelf in the metal market, a lot of people have started really moving their retirement into metals. I'm seeing it like crazy. I never thought that I would see this. Like, you and I have talked about this even 6 months ago, and I had a retirement. I'm like, Andy, what should I do? Well, maybe move a little hit here and do this and do that. You gave me, a little bit of advice. What I'm seeing people do is they're moving all of it, like, and they're not even messing around about it, and they're not letting off the accelerator. That's the one thing that I'm noticing recently, probably within the last, I don't know, 4 to 6 weeks. The other thing that was reported was that China brought back a lot of the Western currency to America. I know specifically that you've talked about this when you said that these companies start bringing our money home to us. That is a sure signal, and I want people to realize that tonight. I'd like for you to comment on that. And the last thing that I want to address is Executive Order 14. I believe it's 1406, which is talking about the Reserve, the Fed, coming up with their own digital currency. Biden just signed that. It's supposed to go into effect, I believe, in December. What does that mean for Americans?
Well, I've been talking about that since March of 2020 when Nancy Pelosi said viruses can live on paper currency. It became very obvious when she came out with her subcommittee finance bill and talked about wanting to have a Fed token because of the potential for viruses to live on currency. It's going to happen. We will see a digital currency. I think it's what the Federal Reserve wants. It's less about keeping their thumb on everyone and more about being able to enact monetary policy without having to deal with the commercial banks. This could spell an end for a lot of the banks. I don't know what the hell the banks will do when the money goes directly from the Federal Reserve to the people, because the way that money is created now, it has to go through the commercial banking system through loans or credit cards.
It's 5 different entities, right? So if I go out and I buy something and I use a credit card to buy it, that credit card company sells that information to a third party. That third party comes to my bank to get it. It's basically like what it was explained to me is it's like a 5 different agencies to do one transaction. What you speak of with the Federal Reserve, it goes straight from the Federal Reserve right into my account.
Yeah, and the second in charge at the Federal Reserve, who I think her name is Lael Brainerd, and she, I believe it's her name, and anyways, she I thought was going to win the Treasury or the Federal Reserve seat. Powell was reconfirmed, and she was anointed second or vice chair. Her whole premise that she wrote a series of papers, if I'm remembering correctly, and she talks about the abolishment of the commercial banks and doing monetary policy directly to the public. If there's inflation needed, they'll give people money directly to their phone. And although she acknowledges it would be controversial, talked about actually taking money out of people's account if indeed they needed to slow things down. Now, I don't know how much that would, how well that would go over, but the point of it is it's getting Orwellian for sure. In that respect. I'm sorry, what were the first questions that you asked me?
So I talked about people protecting
the IRAs,
protecting their retirement, and like I said, this is like a really big thing right now. I'm not a financial advisor, I'm not an expert or anything, but the articles that I've been reading and some of the videos I've been watching, a lot of people moving money because they're afraid of what's about to happen. And the reason why I'm paying attention to that is some of these people that are moving that money are people that are way smarter than me. And so when they're kind of doing something like that, I really pay attention. And I don't want to fall behind or be left behind for that matter. And the other thing was when we talked about cash and China just now brought some of that cash back to America. You've been telling us about that for quite a while and what that means for America.
Yeah, when all of that money comes here, as you know, you're seeing massive divestiture of dollars and in favor of assets. They'll buy up our properties, they'll buy up our farmland, they'll buy our companies, whatever it is. They're selling dollars, they're buying real assets. When those dollars come home and they're no longer abroad, this is going to create inflation, much more inflation than we have seen. And the byproduct of rising inflation is rising interest rates. And so I have felt all along that the Federal Reserve is not what we need to keep our eyes on. It's the rest of the world dumping dollars and or buying things with those dollars while they still have value, and including much of our infrastructure. You know, the largest pork plant in the United States is owned by Chinese. They're buying up all the farmland. They're buying coastal real estate. They're buying up a lot of things that it's sad to say we're selling and for dollars. And they live by a creed of commodities and assets, and we are living by a creed of debt and financial instruments. And that's going to be a problem when things shake out. The real issue to me, again, is the loss of the petrol reserve status. You saw Saudi Arabia just strike a deal with India for oil and gas refineries being built in India and paid for with rupee. You're seeing Saudi Arabia sell their oil to China for the digital yuan, or for, excuse me, the petro yuan bond, which is immediately convertible into gold in the Shanghai Gold Exchange. You're seeing Nigeria sell their oil to Russia and to China for a ruble and the petro yuan bond. You're seeing a move away from the dollar as the world reserve currency, but not really an official move yet. And when that official move happens, that's when it gets really frightening. That's when those dollars come flooding home. And when that happens, that's the moment that you could argue is the Great Reset. When those dollars come flooding home and interest rates spike, the inverse reaction to that moment is stocks and bonds and real estate collapse, but the dumping of all the dollars collapses the dollar too. It's the perfect storm, if you will, as all of these assets collapse at once. But certainly, you know, it's troubling when you see it coming home in an orderly fashion to buy up all of our assets. So not only will that be inflationary, it will end up taking another piece of the asset deck off the table, and
we'll be broke and
stuff's
own
not
nothing.
coming back.
We'll
That's
be
right.
broke. We'll be broke and own nothing. And you know, the World Economic Forum has said that to us. They said we'll own nothing and we'll be happy. And when you speak of China using our own dollars against us and buying our own assets, if they end up owning everything and we go broke, we'll own nothing. And that's very concerning to me. You know, and
Me as well.
people protecting their retirement, I think, is a very important thing to talk about as well, because a lot of us out there just don't have this type of background experience that you guys do in these markets to know when to move things and when to protect ourselves. But you've been telling us for quite a while to protect, protect, protect. And I think when people start seeing these shifts, they're going to start paying attention a whole lot more. And I just don't want it to be too late for them. But what I find disturbing is what you just said. So I listened to what you say, Andy, and what you told me, what you told us tonight is it seems like everybody's in the monopoly game. Everybody's paying attention. Everybody's buying properties. Everybody's shooting for Park Place and Boardwalk. People are exchanging oil. People are exchanging currencies. They're building refineries. But what you didn't say in all that was you didn't say that America has anywhere at the place of that table.
No, and it's all being paid for in currencies that used to be dollars that aren't dollars anymore. When a country like India is going to buy their oil in rupee, this is a bad sign. But even worse of a sign is seeing Saudi Arabia join BRICS. Even worse sign is seeing all 13 OPEC producing countries on the Belt Road. This is a sign that you are seeing these countries formulate a cohesive unit. The hatred or mistrust or just dislike of the West, the Western monopoly, the Western hegemony, the Western perceived hypocrisy, for centuries is enough to bring all of these players to the table, but not enough to keep them together. What does keep them together is the pledging of commodities to a distributed ledger technology. So I think the Chinese digital yuan will be the rails of the new BRICS currency, and all of the countries will pledge a commodity to the new currency. And that's as much as the Russian finance minister in charge of this came out and says, hey, it's going to be a basket of local currencies, but also commodities. And they went as far as saying precious metals and fossil fuels, hydrocarbons, sugar, grain. Each country will pledge something with the immutability and veracity of it on a distributed ledger. And that's when, the dollar will be really challenged. A dollar that is indebted 130 plus trillion versus a coalition of countries that are pledging commodities backing a new currency with, the tether to the inflation spigot being for everyone there to see pegged to a basket of commodities. So it's getting real. Yeah, Zoltan Pozsar, the repo market expert from the New York Fed, came out and said, we are now entering a new world. He called it Bretton Woods 3, where commodities will be the rule of the day, not debt instruments, where countries will peg their currencies to commodities, where commodities will be favored over debt instruments and pieces of paper. And that's what you see. You talk about, as an example, this drive for the United States to go green and get rid of the combustion engine, where, California, you can't buy a combustion engine vehicle after 2030. Well, where all the rare earth metals come from to make those batteries? 85% from China. So we don't even have it, right? And we are setting ourselves up for disaster. And when you look at the fact that we are openly promoting this green agenda, moving away from oil and gas, why the hell would Saudi Arabia want to continue to hitch their wagon to us? Why? Why not hitch it to 90% of human population in this growing coalition of countries that are building an infrastructure under a common distrust and dislike of the system that is? And not only that, part of the Petro Reserve Standard program was for them to take our dollars for their oil and reinvest it in our treasuries. Well, as yields rise, it crushes the bond market. And if they come back in and signal, no, we're not going to allow that to happen, because everything starts to break as yields rise, as rates rise, and they just start inflating it again. Now you're trading your oil and you're reinvesting it in another thing that's inflated and not returning a real return in regards to inflation. I mean, the days of the dollar being the Petro Reserve Standard are coming to an end, and all we're doing is pissing off Saudi Arabia. We're destroying their way of life by saying, we're going green, we don't need you, we just need you for a few more years to bridge the gap. Is that okay? No. How about we'll go to all of these countries around the world who dwarf the West in terms of population and put them all together, have bigger economy and military. They're not going green. They'll be happy to do business with them under a new currency than by the West, who is openly mocking, I guess, what they stand for by saying, hey, we're going green, we're going to get rid of oil and move away from the combustion engine. And, this is a conflict of interest, to say the least.
This is not a lot of news that people want to hear. Everybody likes to hear hopium, and I'm just trying to give them a taste of reality of what's really going on in our world. As a lot of people focus on, somebody putting out information that Donald Trump's going to be back on September 24th. they're so distracted with nonsense like that they're not seeing this big picture that you're painting for all of us tonight, Andy, that this world coalition from the Eastern countries over there, they're out there, like you said, they're building this coalition and these economies that are backed up by commodities, by materials that they can, throw in the basket here, while America is over here doing a photo shoot with Joe Biden in a 1967 Corvette saying, "Hey, folks, hop on into the better America." What better America is he speaking of, Andy? And how can people protect themselves? What hope can we give people tonight to protect their families, to protect their wealth or their retirement that so many people, the baby boomers, busted their butts to make a life for themselves, and we're at a verge where when the government starts to tank, they're gonna, in my opinion, they're gonna take whatever they can, they're gonna grab it quick, and by that time it's too late.
Yeah, they very well may. They tried to do it in 2009. There was a bill that made it down to the House floor that said just that. If we see everything blow up, we should take everyone's IRAs and put them into a government-backed annuity filled with treasuries, or you guarantee the principal, and that stabilizes the treasury market and stabilizes the dollar. But I don't know. Like, I mean, I look at gold and silver as wealth. I don't look at it as an investment. I own it not to get rich. I own it because, originally I always owned it. I never thought we would see times like this ever. I never sold gold this way. I sold it as wealth. I sold it as something that I hope I never needed to use, that I would pass on to my kids someday if I didn't. It's been that way in terms of wealth for 5,000 years. I don't view it as an investment. I say I view it as wealth, but if you own enough of it, you will be wealthy. But when you talk about assets, I would argue that just about everything in this country that makes people feel rich is at the end of a big cycle. And the problem is that the three pillars of wealth, stocks, bonds, and real estate, will all crash at once when rates rise. There's no diversity here. You try to be diversified amongst those asset classes, you're crushed. And so you have to have something outside the dollar. And so what you put into gold and silver, which is the antithesis of the Western system, the antithesis of the dollar, it's the opposite of it, really, has a greater significance now than it used to. You buy it, hope you never need to use it. If you do, you're damn glad you have it for an emergency or an opportunity. If not, you give it to your kids. That is the way that I look at it. And I used to say that, and in the back of my mind, I was always kind of FOMO or envious of the gains I was missing out on in the markets. I will tell you that when you look at what it has taken to bring the markets to where they are right now, in 2008, when the markets crashed, the Fed had a balance sheet of 800 billion. It's 9 trillion right now. And so they've added almost over $8 trillion worth of interest rate assets, mostly US Treasuries and mortgage-backed securities. By them buying all of that, $8 trillion worth, they pushed interest rates to the lowest level in human history and made asset prices at levels that are unrealistic, that have created massive distortions. And when things correct against that backdrop, they'll fall to levels that people can't imagine. And so when you talk about where you can go, you can't go to dollars because the dollar's inflating away. You can't go to stocks because they're way overvalued and will crash when interest rates rise. The bond market is the mother of all bubbles. I would say farmland and precious metals, very, very short-term 6-month T-bills, paying almost 4%. You talk about an inverted yield curve, that's more than you're getting on the 10 and the 30 year. it's everything is upside down in a bizarro world right now. But I would mitigate exposure to risk, to variable rate debt, to stocks, to bonds. I mean, where do you go? I don't know, brother. Try to be objective, and I only come back to the same stuff I sell. And it has nothing to do with the fact that I sell it. It has everything to do with I can't find a place that I would feel safe putting my money right now. And maybe I've lost a little bit of objectivity, but maybe not. Maybe I just see things clearer for what they really are. And that is, it's a Ponzi scheme that has been inflated by the Federal Reserve and the US government, who created copious amounts of money and held interest rates artificially low, which distorted everything. And never before have we had to worry in our lifetime about losing the world reserve currency. We do now. And when that happens, all bets are off. Things get really scary really fast.
You know, I agree with you. I wouldn't put my money in the stock market, not one bit. Nor would I put my money in bonds. I'm a fan of real estate, but this is what I see in real estate right now. Real estate is so inflated right now. You're going to pay twice what property is worth. That's not a good investment for me. So again, it's not because you're on my show. It's because I come back to the same conclusion, which is
what happens if rates rise? If rates rise, so the property values come down, but so what? They find equilibrium. But if rates rise, the cost of money will move up commensurate with the decrease in the property value. So, look at it this way: $1 million mortgage a year ago would have been $3,000 a month before taxes and before insurance. Let's call it $3,500 a month. That same deal right now would be about $8,000 a month. So, what happens if rates go from where they are now and they double? So then it's $16,000 a month. So as rates rise, property values exponentially will decrease because the cost of money increases. And so real estate at high levels, all of it really achieved at super low interest rates. What is making the fact that I told you it's the lowest number of new house purchases since 1952 is because they haven't come down yet and rates have risen. So you have high price values and the cost of money has gone way up. Even if the prices of homes come down, the cost of money has gone way up and the banks aren't really excited about lending. Right now, the banks have over $2 trillion in the reverse repo market, where they take their money and give it to the Fed overnight and get treasuries back, instead of lending it to you and I for a home equity loan or a 30-year mortgage or whatever, because the economy is such that they don't want to do so. So, when the home prices come down, the only way that the real estate market is a good bet is if rates don't rise. And if rates don't rise, in fact, if they lower rates, well, we have a bigger problem. That is, the dollar will lose all of its standard, will lose all of its credibility. The Fed will lose all of its credibility, and we have a bigger problem. There is no easy way out of this. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So I think it's about being conservative and getting the hell out of harm's way. So yeah, real estate, you have to live somewhere. But to me, if you're going to buy any real estate, it would be something like a farm or a ranch or something that allows you to grow food and get out of the cities. And it's a tough one for me right now. Real estate has had a hell of a boom for 30 years. I think it's probably not the best place to invest your money right now as rates rise.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Andy. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I just I want to go to final thought, and I know that we've covered a lot of stuff in the last 40 minutes, and some of this stuff I'm sure is very concerning for people. A lot of people probably at this point want to just turn the TV off. I can't hear no more. This is depressing. I get that comment quite a bit when you speak reality to people. A lot of people want to hear rainbows and unicorns all the time, but that's not reality. And we're simply just trying to put a warning out to people so that you can protect yourself, protect your family. And in my opinion, a scenario that could get very bumpy real quick and could last for a little while. So your final thought for tonight, is there anything out there? And I know I pretty much just asked you that question. Hope for people. I just say, I guess, buckle up and get ready for what's about to happen, because like you said, it's just happened at a rapid pace, and you can't even believe how quickly it's unfolding.
Yeah, I wish I had a more cheery message. It's a bummer that I don't. This is why I never talk to my friends. A lot of people in the new community I live in don't have any idea the way that I look at the world. And it's because this is not a great message, but it's one that I'd rather be prepared for and be able to survive and maybe even thrive in this environment. There will be winners and more losers than winners in this environment. He or she who loses least wins. And I think that's important. And you need to, instead of falling victim, do what you can to come out of this okay. And just to understand that it's the ideal of every single nation to print as much money as they want, but at the same time, keeping inflation in check. And the question is, how do they do that? They do that about lying about the inflation rate, and they end up doing that about lying about the information and the things that are very, very important. And we're all going to wake up to a new reality someday. So if you have these feelings in any capacity, then do what you can to prepare. And I think any measure of preparation prior to this type of an event happening is important. Take every moment that you have to find a way to get stronger mentally and physically and financially. Prepare, even if you have to do it reluctantly. I think you'll be glad that you did.
All right. Well, my final thought is this, Andy. Prepare, folks. I think Andy is correct. Whether that's more beans in the can, whether that's more cases of water, a little extra fuel for the generator, or purchase a generator. And I strongly suggest get yourself a little bit of precious metals as well. You can do that at info@milesfranklin.com. Use promo code Liberty Warrior Nation. Reach out to Miles Franklin and get a hold of the great team that they have. Ask questions. It doesn't hurt to just call and ask questions. And then if you guys are interested in making a purchase, gold, silver, to me, it doesn't really matter. It's just making sure that you can protect your family against high inflation and a possible reset. And I just really strongly suggest people to take that opportunity and do it. Andy and his team are great people. I've worked with them, and they're always able to answer the questions, and great product, great service. And so, Andy, thank you so much for being part of LWN and being a supporter here. It does make a difference to keep us going. And so with that being said, people, good night. God bless. Stay safe. And we'll catch you on the next one.
Hoping for a sincere performance, but open to finding the moment to finding out where I'm headed now. Looking for a sign of disaster, so I can make it there faster. I'm weighing the consequences out. I can see in all directions. It's all open to interpretation, but I see colors that are breaking from the other side, the other side. When I make mountains out of summer trails, when I buckle under all the details, I'll keep going till I make it to the other side, the other side. Can you tell me the secret of how you can take it or leave it? How you can blend in with the crowd? I'm so scared, so damn afraid to look. I'm so sick of talking. I'm wearing the words out, words out. I can see in all directions. It's all open to interpretation, but I see colors that are breaking from the other side, the other side. When I make mountains out of summer trails, when I buckle under all the details, I'll keep going till I make it to the other side, the other side. When it feels like everyone's out to get me,